That's former governor of Ekiti, alleges plan to hike petrol price. Details on page 8. Bayo.
Well, the story that have dominated the front pages of most papers is the minimum wage debacle. However, there is some misrepresentation by some papers. The New Telegraph says Labour suspends planned nationwide strike. The Sun reports that new minimum wage is 30,000. The Nation also follows in the same misleading headline by saying the panel proposes 30,000 minimum wage, and it adds that another 24,000 minimum wage. However, following the meeting of the tripartite meeting, it went late into the night yesterday, and the chairman of the tripartite committee, Ama People, said the committee arrived at two figures, 24,000 and 30,000 naira as new minimum wage. Federal government suggested 24,000. Labour and organized private sector suggested 30,000. There is no stalemate. We have signed it. What we are insisting is that the strike should be called off. The strike has not been called off. Labour has suspended the strike. It will be recalled that the pressures were even on at the court yesterday. At the National Industrial Court, the court declined a request by Labour to compel government to adopt 30,000 as a new minimum wage. In another suit, the court also declined a fresh order by Kingdom Human Rights Foundation to restrain organized labor from commencing the strike today. The court argued that since the parties were already in negotiation, it was unnecessary to compel any party to agree to any outcome. On the request for the other request, the court declined that the earlier order it issued is still subsisting and that the parties may have to come to court if they failed to disagree. Meanwhile, President Muhammad Buhari on Monday, while hosting the Association of Retired Career Ambassadors, urged workers to consider what government inherited and how it has been managing scarce resources to put the economy right. The Senate President also appealed to the federal government and Labour to work to avert the strike in the interest of the Nigerian public. I guess now the ball is now in the court of both the President of the Federal Republic and the President of the Senate, because it will now go to the Federal Executive Council, after which it should go to the National Assembly before it becomes law. So the ball is in the court of the two, the President and the Senate President, who were all appealing to Labour to let peace reign. But meanwhile, Labour is playing safe by suspending the strike, waiting the outcome of the whole processes.
What is the difference between calling off a strike and then calling off, the intention of a strike, which was due to commence today, and then suspending a strike?
When you suspend a strike,
yes,
it means the strike is kept in abeyance, and if certain conditions that you are expecting do not meet, then you reawake the strike. It's not the first time they suspended the strike. Don't forget that when they came up with that strike earlier on, it was again, it was from a suspension, and it went again into action, and they threatened another action on November 6th.
Yeah, but I'm sure you know that that's always been the language of ASU. They say they have suspended the strike, the strike. And each time you just dust up the papers and say, okay, we are resuming our strike. Yeah. There's no labor organization can be in a perpetual state of strike.
Yes.
It's like a war. It's if you declare an armistice is not the end of the war. Technically, you are still at war. So what kind of business environment or economy can withstand, a perpetual state of industrial action? It's unhelpful. That's the way. If they call off the strike, they've called it off, and if there are no conditions that will warrant them going back on strike, then that's something to deal with.
Yes,
I'm sure you have other headlines.
Yes, at the risk of repetition, but let's just tell you, let you know that the strike is the major issue in the papers, and Bayo has highlighted New Telegraph. But there is a rider to their Labour suspend strike story, which gives cause for question. They say 11 unions vow to grant hospitals, power, schools, transport, if. Now, is that if, is it predicated on the submission of the report, or if the conditions that you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and Bayo has also outlined, the next steps, and those next steps are very crucial. The report is going to the president today, 4:15, we understand, or later in the afternoon, depending on what happens. And thereafter, the Federal Executive Council will consider it before a bill goes to the National Assembly. And President of the Senate himself, Saraki, has no control over how members of the National Assembly would behave when they are in receipt of the bill for a new national minimum wage. So it's still early days, unless everybody is saying that, look, once you have submitted a report, then like you have in a military regime, suddenly a decree is issued tomorrow by the federal military government, as it used to be in the past. But no minimum wage, of course, has come. In 1981, when we had that, it was Shagari who was in office. Nigerian pilot is our next port of call. Buhari cries out, that's the lead story for the paper, and it has 4 riders. Says Nigerian roads and rail in deplorable condition. Assures he has big plans to fix them. I'm saying Nigerian pilot. Two other riders regrets lost opportunity to fix rail and roads between 1999 and 2015. And he insists he knows condition of roads and how to fix them. Once again, Buhari cries out. Details of that story can be found on page 4. Below the photograph there on the front page, Nigeria safer under Buhari. That's according to Information Minister Lai Mohammed. Insecurity, COS, Chief of Army Staff, calls for review of security architecture. And ICT shows up Nigeria's second quarter growth by over 11%. That's according to President Buhari. And 19 arraigned in Jos High Court over missing General Al-Khali. Yes,
we'll take a New Telegraph, and one story we'll highlight on the front page is primaries, 100 aspirants. That's New Telegraph. Primaries, 100 aspirants sue Oshomole, INEC, and APC. And then right after that is Jerry Ghana seeks Donald Duke's disqualification on page 4. Let's limit our highlight of New Telegraph to that, because most of the stories have been talked about in Labour.
All right, Bayo, I want to discuss those stories, or you take the editorial now?
I wanted, before I take the editorial, there's need to emphasize the position of 6 governors of the Southwest about the gridlock and Apapa. They are suggesting that there should be an alternative, and the immediate alternative they are thinking of is the railway link, to use the railway to evacuate containers to certain points so as to decongest the Apapa gridlock. They held a meeting in Oshogbo, and that was part of their resolution, because they expressed concern that it is not only affecting the economy of the states in that part of the country, but it's affecting the economy of the whole nation. Meanwhile, the Nigerian Railway too has set about is Lagos-Kano Express that had to be put on abeyance because of the recent flood. Due to flood, states in like Oyo, Kwara, Niger, and Zamfara were affected because of the flood.
About that, Bayo, yes. It's part of the mistakes we have made in our planning.
Yes.
Industries in the 60s and 70s, you know, had rail lines passing through them.
Yes.
You know, the industries in the in Kakuri area in Kaduna.
Yes, in the textiles.
All of them have rail lines passing through them. The ones in Lagos too, the older industries, all have rail lines passing through them. Now people build industries, and there's no compulsion of having rail lines. Of course, since the national line of the rail has died, you can't compel an industry to. But that is supposed to be the standard. Ferry out your goods from the industry through rail, not necessarily road.
Yes, the best imports ports around the world, like for instance in Dubai and others, 4 hours, anything you import, you get it cleared and out. And the total number of cargo there is not compared to what we have, but it depends upon how you use technology and also access, variety of access to evacuate goods from the port.
Bayo, thank you very much. The issue of Apapa ports is something that we have discussed on Good Morning Nigeria on a number of occasions. There are ports that are virtually idle on the eastern flank of the country.
Yes.
Port Harcourt, Calabar, Warri, Koko, and others. So, what to do? These are issues that our guests have often talked about. Our editorial this morning is taken from the Nigerian Pilot, and it's at page 3. Is INEC ready for 2019 elections?
Well, that's a poser posed by Pilot, and incidentally, the INEC chairman, while receiving a delegation of ECOWAS on pre-election monitoring, indicated that INEC is ready. And he gave this situation. He said yesterday, INEC chairman told ECOWAS pre-election fact-finding committee that as far as INEC is concerned, we are prepared. 2019 election is the most deliberately and well-planned election in our electoral history. The INEC chairman said, we have finished strategic planning. we have finished strategic program of action, we have finished election project plan, and we have issued timetable and schedule plan for February 2019 general election. He says there are 14 activities and they are following them routinely. However, the editorial is raising concerns. Why is it that the electoral amendment that was passed by the National Assembly has not been sent to the executive for assent? And he's also talking about concern about funding for INEC, which has also been passed, but he's not sure, the editorial is not sure whether it has been signed, assented, and therefore INEC is likely to be strapped by for cash. But talking about INEC, today INEC is commencing the display of register, and it is 300,000 names have been deleted from the register. This was using the, what do they call it? The computer system to identify fingerprints. And it is left for you and I to go to 120,000 polling booths around the nation to identify names that ought not to be on the voters register. So INEC says the ball is in your court. Make sure that the voters register is foolproof, and so that we can have a free, fair, and credible election.
All right, Bayo, thank you very much. As you said, the editorial was on the question whether INEC is ready for the 2019 elections. I mean, there are a number of issues with the editorial in the first instance. The major plank is to say, look, funding is a challenge, and then the Electoral Act amendment bill has not been assented to by the president. The extant law, therefore, remains the Electoral Act 2010 as amended. That's what INEC is going by. The editorial asks the question, when will INEC print election materials? The INEC chairman has spoken extensively on this. He said that, look, INEC is rolling out with his plans, and that 3 months ahead from now, the elections, of course, will be conducted. The paper is calling for an emergency to be declared with regard to the 2019 elections. That will appear to be an exaggeration.
Yes, you know, we tend to say emergency every time we face a challenge. We have about 101 days to the election, and INEC says it is ready. Bayo,
thank you very much for being with us today. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria, still on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There's no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Team huddle.
But we lost.
Don't be tired, guys. This isn't a loss. It's a practice for winning.
Nothing makes a mother prouder than seeing her child growing up. But I know as he learns to lead, he'll face even more dirt, germs, and risk of illness.
That's why in changing seasons, you need strong Dettol protection. Because Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Growing up needs Dettol protection.
Fake news which is shared for malicious purposes is a danger to our peace and security in Nigeria. Misinformation as fake news is a serious threat to our hard-earned democracy and promotes hatred and misunderstanding between our communities. We are all responsible for stopping the spread of fake news in its tracks. So, always check the source and credibility of any news item. Say no to fake news. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information.
Chief. Good morning, sir. You are here already?
No. Now my spirit day, my body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jab questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I am sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Better.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, just hours ago, organized labor called off the proposed nationwide industrial action following the agreement reached by and signed also by all members of the tripartite committee headed by a former head of the civil service of the Federation, Ms. Ama Pepo, on a new national minimum wage. Correspondent Ahmed Ondas Ahmed put together this background as a prompt for our conversation this morning.
The long waiting by the Nigerian workers both in private and public sector seems to be over, as the Tripartite Committee is said to submit the final copy of the proposed new minimum wage by Tuesday to President Muhammadu Buhari. NLC President Ayuba Waba is optimistic that the agreed figure to be presented to the President will suit all and sundry.
An agreement has been reached, and also documents have been signed. The report will be submitted to Mr. President, and therefore organized labor will want to use this medium to thank all the tripartite partners for their understanding and, importantly, for concluding this very important national assignment. And having reached this position, and also the fact that the assignment had been concluded, the organized labor also decided that the proposed strike action is hereby suspended.
SGF, who was impressed with the national interest shown by the Tripartite Committee members, says Nigeria is the winner in this struggle.
I put it on record that this committee has worked assiduously over the last 12 months to arrive at the very concrete decisions that were reached and which the President has graciously accepted to receive the report tomorrow.
To Minister of Labour and Productivity, Chris Ngige, the magic in this dialogue is the power of give and take in the labour industry.
Dialogue, that's social dialogue. That's what is required in labour negotiations. So we have dialogue, give and take, and it's done.
Ahmed Ondas Ahmed, NTA News.
Now joining us in the studio to discuss this topic and the next, indeed, are very prominent people who have been following the issues and the polity. The first, the former Deputy Governor of Abia State, Dr. Chris Akomas, and a member of the BOT of the All Progressive Congress. You're welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
We also have with us some sort of a regular on this program, Dr. Kayode Ajulo, a legal practitioner, Abuja based here. You're welcome to.
Good morning. Good morning.
And also with us in the studios, we have Aliyu Abdullahi, he's a lawyer and public affairs analyst, policy analyst. By the way, Aliyu Abdullahi, a pleasure to have you with us again on the program.
Thank you for having me again.
Okay. All right, let's begin the conversation straight away. Labour has suspended its planned industrial action that was due to kick off today on the basis of issues arising from the negotiations of a new national minimum wage. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts on what has played out? Let's begin with the former Deputy Governor of Abia State, Dr. Akomas.
Thank you very much. I want to start by commending all the parties involved in the negotiations, and especially the tripartite committee, that did the necessary work all these months. And I want to also commend especially the members of the Labour, family for coming to terms with this situation. It would have been a very devastating thing for Labour to go on strike at this time, and the way they mobilized, the way it was planned, would have actually taken us several months back, if not years. This is not a time that Nigerians, would find it enduring or acceptable to go through a shutdown of activities, because most Nigerians now live from what they make on a daily basis. So closing up things and activities would have been very bad. I also want to commend the federal government and those that are involved, the Minister of Labor, the President, and the SG, and all the members of the family that worked on this. As at yesterday, when they were meeting, I was praying seriously that they come up with a solution. So the important thing now is that the chairman of the tripartite committee, the former head of service, former minister, and experienced woman of outstanding character, have been able to come together with others to have an agreement. So since there is an agreement, there is something to work on, and Mr. President, we received that today. So we look forward to smooth implementation of that agreement, and this is where I urge that all parties should also look forward to ensuring that the implementation of the agreement would be reasonably smooth. We have to do it with some patience, because it's like transiting from one level to another, so that the implementation will not cause us another hiccup or problems before the general elections. We need peace, we need tranquility, and we need stability to go through what is coming in the next few weeks and months ahead of us. So I commend them all.
Dr. Ajula, we're looking forward to a smooth implementation, just as Dr. Akomas just said. But it's like there are people who don't even know who to blame for where we found ourselves. There are people who said, why should Labour sleep over its right over the years? There are people who said government too did not do anything when the Constitution already stipulated a 5-year review period. Learning from this process, how should review of minimum wage, how should we go about it in the next time?
Well, I don't think this would be the right time for blame game, particularly when one is not even sure of what the final agreement is. As of now, nobody can really say this is what it is. But to that question, I don't think we need to blame anybody apart from blaming those who really need, whose interest is being violated, let me use that word, particularly when the law ought to be obeyed. And sometimes when law seems not to be obeyed, I believe those who believe they have right in that law need to take issue to activate the provision of that. We've been saying that, and I'm sure we mentioned this here in this program 2 or 3 times to raise this fact that the law is so clear that this issue of minimum wage should be reviewed every at least 5 years and this is what the law says. And I believe that this is something that, whether we like it or not, irrespective of the interest, it has to be obeyed. So as it is, I want to believe that, it is more of everything in Nigeria is politics. It is about interest. It is good for government, particularly at this time, to increase workers' salary because election is at hand. And it is good for labor to wait at particular hours to demand for that, because they will believe that if you should do that maybe earlier, government may just choose to give us anything. But since election is at hand, government need to look good, and the incumbent need to come back. So we need to now discuss it now, so that at the end of the day, the applause, everything will come together and we lead to translate to more goodwill and more vote for whosoever that have turned and make this one happen. But as it is, we need to congratulate ourselves, congratulate the labor, congratulate the government, at least for meeting the yearnings of Nigerian workers. And like I said earlier, it is not over until when one is so sure of what we are taking and what we are getting.
All right, thank you very much. Ali Abdullahi, what are your thoughts on the suspension of the proposed strike?
Well, my thoughts are just like every other Nigerian, I believe. The strike wouldn't have been a good omen for the country. All have been set back in terms of money lost, in terms of productivity. That wouldn't have been good for our economy, for our GDP. Don't forget that after we came out of recession, we are now growing at about 1.9%. So imagine what could the strike have done to the entire country's economy. You know, households' economy will have been shut down, productivity decline. You know, I can't even quantify the loss to the entire country's economy. So that is the suspension. It's really a very good thing to happen to the country, and I think that is besides politics. This has nothing to do with politics. This is our country. When it is good, we benefit. When it's going bad, we all actually suffer for it. So, of course, the labor should try to enforce what should be the right for their members, the working force of Nigeria. And I'm very happy that the government at various levels, actually that is federal government and state level, could come in and agree have a meeting point. And to safeguard against this kind of standoff position between the labor and the employers, be it organized private sector or actually government, I think there should be a regular interval meetings before those 5 years. You don't wait until those 5 years. You start actually negotiating as your productivity is increasing. You start discussing how do you actually review it and what percentage can actually be reviewed that will be in tandem with the economic situation in the country. And also, this also is a serious call to the governors, to the state governors, because one big group of the government that hold out this position for a long, because the federal government was actually ready to pay. It was willing. They can't actually meet the request of the labor. But the state governments on their own part claimed they couldn't, because most of them, they couldn't improve on their internal revenue generation. And that's a big issue. That is actually telling on how viable or unviable our states are. So they need to actually look inward in their resources, tap on their competitive and comparative advantages, which every state really has, you know, to see how do we increase. Few states can actually meet even the proposed request by labor, but majority couldn't, because all the state governments do is to wait for end of the month, come to the center with their ball and collect. It's almost like a feeding bottle economy. So that has to change in order not to actually fall within this crisis again in the future. And of course, is it a good thing for this government politically? I think so. I think the government has done good by solving this issue, and it is doing a lot. When you see pensioners, you know, all pensioners that didn't receive a dime for many years, past governments came and gone. Nothing was done to any of these particular pensioners. Nigerian Airways, Nitel staff, all of them retrenched without being settled. Now this government is doing it. And they have done it again with the issue of minimum wage. So politically, I think it's good for this administration.
Well, thank you for the points that you have raised. Let me return to Dr. Akomas. The benchmark often cited by advocates of a revised new national minimum wage had to do with what they described as in some cases, scandalous take-home of political office holders. They have made comparisons, for instance, to what members of the National Assembly are earning, what their aides are earning, what aides to state governors are earning, indeed what political appointees are earning. But let's, a comparison, of course, with some other very well-known parastatals whose wage structure is well outside of the civil service structure. What does this portend? I mean, is this an argument that is going to keep coming up and up and up? Does it therefore call for a review of the wage structure nationwide or service-wide?
Thank you. You see, this issue of the large disparity between the earnings of political office holders and the civil servants is something that we've been at for many years. And I think the issue here is that we have institutions, we have structures on ground that should make this issue an easy one to resolve. We have the Wage Commission. We also have the other institutions that fix what is due to even the political office holders. I remember that what we were earning was first based on what came from the, Salaries and Wages Commission and all those things. But the area we have to look into is how people have found a way of circumventing these things with other names, other nomenclatures of, entitlements and allowances and all that. It's happening within the political, system, but also even within the services. You just mentioned about some, agencies and that have their, pay structure outside the system, but these are still MDAs within the government. These are people working with about the same qualifications, same training and all that. And if you list all these, there are so many of them. There was a time I was doing a study on that, and I said, what could one actually present as the real convincing, reasons and evidence why somebody in this place should earn so much more than someone who is in the straight civil service structure or system? Because when you look at the disparity so much, and then there are introductions of all sorts of allowances and things that now beef up what the take-home pay of these people get as against it. And painfully, you discover that those people that earn less are the ones supervising all these agencies.
That's right.
So you begin to wonder, if somebody in this place earning less is supervising an agency where someone he supervises earns much higher than him, and maybe he or she was better trained, qualified many years ago, how fair are these? So it's a systemic error. We have a problem here. The institutions are there. There is need to now look into that. It has grown. It gradually, continued to expand. Over the years, people apply, they get that waiver, they get this to do all that. And now we have a huge number of such discrepancies, which should be done. Now you talk about the politicians and what they earn. people keep referring to what happens in the National Assembly and all that. If you look at the records of what the salary of those people are, their actual pay and actual allowances as approved by the Salaries and Wages Commission, you will see that it may not be too far away from what should be, but by the time they come up with all these other areas and issues padded, you have this large problem, which we have to look into, because that is why a lot of people, I said that most people, when you even come to talk about things, and they don't look at what the person offers again is how much money. And when people offer such money, they are seeing it as business, that what they are going to do, whether in any political office, is business. When they get there, they focus on that business of making money. But when we focus on services and reduce our attitude of expecting people to throw about money just because they are holding political offices and not to serve and deliver the, services, either developmental-wise or, in every aspect that will be sustainable, then we miss the point. There is need to go beyond this periodic review of minimum wage. Minimum wage is applicable, people apply that, not only in Nigeria, all over the world, in the US, in Canada and all that, people, they set minimum wage. But there is need to ensure that our system is properly worked on. The indices based on which these wages are set should be our focus. Where you talked about the benchmark, what are the economic indices? What are the relative value placed on the jobs, positions, and services provided? Okay, somebody will have a job that you do within a certain period of time or years. And as you do that, like in political offices, it is known that as you do that, you step on toes, you do this. These are things expected. And that is why at a certain point you expected that there are things you can't actually get about doing as you used to do before. But then to go way out to say that what one person takes home can pay 3-4 ministries is scandalous.
All right, Dr. Akobas, thank you very much. I mean, Femi, I was just saying, one of the issues that Dr. Akobas already discussed, and I would like Dr. Ajulo to also respond to that, which has to do with whether or not the benchmark against which the proponents of a new minimum wage were placing their argument should be one that should not be interrogated. That is to say, the emoluments of political office holders, and we saw this come about in 2006, 2007 under the Obasanjo administration, on the argument that, listen, if you pay political office holders properly, if you pay them well, then you might also reduce the incentive for their being light-fingered. That's one leg of it. Now, intra-service, that's to say the line ministries, you find a huge disparity also between directors and permanent secretaries. But the difference is almost 300%. And permanent secretaries are appointed by quota, by the way, from amongst the ranks of directors. So they are equal. And then, on the basis of your state or zone, you become a permanent secretary. You are earning 3 times more than those who were your contemporaries. So, and then, of course, there are the other MDAs, super agencies, if you like, who have their own wage structure. How can these issues be taken head on, along with the arguments that have been made now, for a revised new national minimum wage?
Well, I must confess, the whole thing is as complex as the question and the way you try to make us to understand it. But one thing I will like us not to close our eyes from is the fact that what is even the meaning, the essence, the fundamentals of this national minimum wage. As it is, we seem to reduce everything to public sector, whereas we have the private sector. Like I have my law firm, and I'm sure some of us the essence itself, and I think that is what we should focus on, that when we call it national minimum wage, that is the minimum whatsoever. It is like a peg. You can't go below this, and that is what we should try. We should begin in. Once we start focusing our mind to that, and I think we'll be able to really appreciate what we're trying to say. And apart from that, though I know today the whole focus mainly is on the National Assembly and some NDAs taking so much of money, but I've come with the experience has revealed that even in most of these civil servants, under different guise of different heading, subheading, or call it running grant, call it impress and co, you realize that it has gone, it's like the whole thing about what they take home, nobody can really explain it. And I believe the best way to cure this malady, the best way to stop it is political will. But the question is that who will bear the cat? Because like you rightly put it, permanent secretary who's supposed to give directives, you'll find out that they are within them and the directors seem to be a huge gap. And just imagine the gap that will be within this director and other lower cadre and lower rank. And these things seem to be, and experience too has shown that not the number and the amount of money you are paid that made you to be light finger or not to be light finger. Because today you see somebody earning over almost $1 billion or over 50 million and over as a salary. Even in private sector, you can see what happened to them, the way how light finger they are. Example that those banks during the Sanusi, you can see what happened. So the issue now is not how much you take home or what it is, but what matters most is the institution, particularly the regulatory institution, those institutions to enforce most of this law. You find out that we seem the institution have been tied to the individual on it, and that is why we always have this problem. But the institution, of course, people will tend to steal. Like I read, like the way we used to say it, if you choose to sleep, even your being passive, your being passive may even made you to turn to allow to make thieves or robbers of a saint. And that is what I believe what it is. You need to be very vigilant, even put to tax most of this agency. And again, those regulators, those institutions that are supposed to enforce the law and to enforce it. Except that we will continue to be going rigmaroling on this matter.
Now, Aliu, the national minimum wage, must it be publicly negotiated? Because when we talk about these disparities, a lot of these MDAs, a lot of these people who earn much more higher than any other one, did not come publicly to come and negotiate it. It just went into the system. Must we always make a circus of minimum wage? Why, in the civil service, even as we speak, there's what they call annual increment. Yes. It comes into the system. It just goes in there. Can't a minimum wage be streamlined and planned and calculated based on all the benchmarks and all the issues that have been raised, and it goes into salaries after 5 years, since the Constitution already stipulates 5 years now? Must it, because we are already looking, some of the contentions now is about inflation, what this minimum wage will cost us once we approve it. It's because we make a noise about it.
Well, okay, let me attempt to answer your question. I have 10 years public service experience also, coming from one of those agencies. He's trying to say super agencies also anyway, but I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, the reason why it has to be publicly discussed or negotiated is because, like Mr. Kaede said, it's about, that is the benchmark or the peg that supposedly no one should go above, beyond, not only within government, but even within the private sector. If you don't negotiate it, and because the law requires that actually, for you to have that 5 years review of that. And but after that, after this come into effect, implementation now is the next thing. Of course, there are some government agencies, like I said, the entire federal government said during these negotiations that they can actually meet up with the requested figure from the label. But the state government said no. Even the private sector went a little bit above what the states were offering, but they couldn't even get to the level of what federal government was offering. So you can see why there was need for the negotiation. And in this kind of negotiation, the labor definitely will have to, it has to be a public something. And they chose a fantastic time to actually force the hands of employers, federal government being the biggest employer of labor in this country. So because of the political cycle that we are in. So, but be it as it may, you know, one thing we have to realize also, when you go back, when you talk about the issue of the disparity between agencies or between certain cadres and others, truly there are some agencies that hide all kinds of allowances to beef off the wages or the salaries of their staff. And some of them, they don't make it actually kind of legal, because there is a commission that monitors, that's supposed to approve when you want to have an increase salaries for your kind of commission, depending on the sector or the industry you are working, because they make excuses. For example, agencies, government agencies that work with the financial sector, most of the argument they advance to the commission is, look, we supervise banks, financial institutions. We want our staff to be above board when they go for bank examination and supervision, etc. So if we don't pay them well, they are likely going to compromise. So that kind of argument can hold waters. And the same thing with the oil industry, the agencies of government that work in that field. That's the same argument they can bounce to the commission. Again, I don't also like the disparity between the senior management staff and the middle level and the other cadres. You will see it not only in the basic salary, but even in the composition of other such as upfronts. So that's another thing. That's more of an internal issue, if you ask me, because I believe each organization has associations and unions within. So these are the kind of things they must have a voice within first to rise up, you know, and see where they can fill up the gap. I remember an episode where in my agency where I used to work, the DG actually, when she came on board at that time, the management staff gave her a proposal of an allowance. They call it gas allowance, diesel allowance, because of the situation of light in the country at that time. She said, but what about the the middle level and junior staff? What will happen to them? Because I didn't see them included on this proposal. They said, no, you see, they don't have generators. She said, but if you want me to approve it, go and include them, because if they don't have generator, they have at least a lantern. So get a kerosene allowance for them. Otherwise, I'm not going to approve it. So this is neither here nor there, but I think it's really, the problem is huge. It cannot be solved collectively. But what the minimum wage does is to create a uniformity of the pegging order of what a Nigerian worker, the minimum he can get.
All right, Ali Abdullahi, thank you very much. The last comment you just made, of course, restates what Dr. Kayode Ajulo also said with regard to how to properly, in his view, frame the idea of a national minimum wage. That's the minimum to be paid. But we do know, and indeed the Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment was with us in the studios late last week, and he confirmed, and indeed that view has been abroad for a while, that once you set a new national minimum wage, then there is a knock-on effect right up from level 1 to level 17. You will have to adjust all the salaries. It will go through not just the civil service, but through the public service. And then you have a number of other entities that are also tied to this. You have specialized salary structures or peculiar salary structures that will also be impacted. Those are the economic consequences. Gentlemen, we'll take a short break now. And when we return, we'll be dealing with another topic with the same guests.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream
at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live for the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are done already with the call-off of the proposed industrial action or strike by organized labor with regard to the new national minimum wage, the report of which will be submitted to the president later this afternoon. We still have our three guests with us, and this time we're looking at 2019. Just about 3 months, of course, to the commencement of the general elections. Gentlemen, we are taking a look at this issue. What has come up with regard to the lead up to the elections? Of course, we have had the party primaries and the acrimony arising from the party primaries. As the acrimony is now trying to be sorted out through various reconciliation moves by the various apparatchiks of the political parties. And just about 2 weeks or less from now, formal flag-off of campaigns would begin. What is it that we are likely to see in the lead-up to the 2019 elections? Let's begin with the veteran politician, Dr. Akomas.
Thank you, Kingsley. We are in a period that is not totally strange to all of us. In fact, when this issue of labor going on strike came up, I just tuned my mind back to 2014, 2015, before the elections. And we have seen a number of things replaying, and seems to be a kind of thing that people are beginning to. What I see coming up, I've been following comments and actions of various political parties and our main political gladiators, especially the presidential candidates and the political parties. What is coming is like people wanting to take us back to the hate speeches, individual character muslinging and all that that we've seen happened in the past. But I have always urged and appealed to people that both the followers, both the contestants and the political parties should please save us the trouble of things that will not help us in our, in advancing our development. A good thing from what we have seen, INEC, seem and appear to have really done a lot of work to improve the system. It's not easy, and we expect and hope that things will turn out better. We have the timetables, we have the people now ready. The reconciliatory efforts are ongoing. There's no way reconciliation can be total and complete before the elections are conducted. But campaigns will start soon. And given how fragile our situation has been in the past years, especially security-wise and economic-wise, people should now focus on issue-based campaign. They should tell us what they are bringing to the table. What are you coming to do for us? There are issues, there are problems that we are facing. What solutions do you have to solve and resolve these issues? We just discussed about minimum wage and all that, and why are people clamoring? It's because the value of what we have is eroded by the policies, the actions that we take. The leadership that we seek is one that will take us positively from where we are now to a level more positive and more sustainable. So what I have seen is people trying to make it the issue of Kayode said that because he's a lawyer. Chris Akoma said that that's not what we want. What we want is Kayode has offered himself to serve as a president or in whatever capacity. What are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? What are the things that he can do to solve our problems? If he can't, is, you know, my friend, better placed and all that. So let us not continue to dwell on all these blames and all that. Let us look at people that can really make something good and make something happen. And like I said at another forum, I said, we have 2 major political parties that are on this. That is not taking anything away from the other political parties. We have 91 political parties, and a number of them have their presidential candidates. I think INEC said they received about 80-something names, you know, published as presidential candidates. So they are all Nigerians, strong in their own right and this thing, but we need some capable hands. What has this administration done within the 3 years plus that they've been on board? What are the things we can see? What are the things that the others want to do? President Muhammadu Buhari will be running on the record of his performance, in addition to the integrity thing that all accept that he will be running on the records of his performances within these 3.5 years. And I've seen and heard people argue, you are completing projects started by previous administrations. Where are your own projects? Government is a continuum. And this happened to be part of our problems in this country. People come on board jettisoning whatever project the previous administrations started, whether good or bad, and not looking at this. So my focus and hope is that we will begin to look at people that will tell us truly and effectively what they can do. And good thing we have from both major political parties and even some of the other parties that we consider small, people that have been in government, people that have some experiences, and people that we can refer to their past and present records, and we can now, you know, just oppose their capabilities and see if that is what can take us. So my urge and appeal is that everybody campaigning this time should think first Nigeria, the survival, our unity. They should do more of those things that keep us together. They should tell us more of what they can do that will enhance us. We are wealthy. Let somebody enhance and, well, you know, help us organize this, our wealth, so that it can get to everybody. Our commonwealth should not continue to be a curse instead of a blessing.
Yeah. Dr. Kayode Ajulo, yes. It would seem that the effects of the primaries are not going away. Yes. In 2 weeks, campaigns will start, and campaigns are inter-party campaigns. But we still find the bitterness of primaries still hanging around. In your opinion, have parties settled from the primaries as to be able to launch into a campaign that takes into cognizance what Dr. Akoma has just said?
Well, it's clear that party are yet to get over with the nightmare of that primary. It is like a carryover. It is something that even after the election, they will still have to contend about that. Good enough is I wish that this new electoral law, I think that it has been passed. The issue of pre-election matters, having the limited time, will have even solved it. But as of now, even after the election, I'm very sure there will be a lot of pre-election cases in our court. That one shows that till even after the election, we'll still continue to have this issue. But as it is, it's so expected because we are talking of struggle for power. Some people see it like that is the life and death. Many people see like they're seeking this kingdom of God. Everything will be added. Once you have the power in Nigeria, every other thing will be added. So everybody ready to lose their limbs, their head, and whatsoever. But my worry now is that in the next 2 weeks, we'll be starting the re-campaign. That is why the issue of this hate speech and whatsoever it is will now be unleashed on Nigeria. And my worry again, my worry therefore is to the fact that you notice I like mentioning institution of government, those that need to regulate, because that's the only way to fix this. I have seen that in this country, even the saints sometimes always have problems when it comes to their interest. But if you can have an impartial institution, impartial arbitrator that can look at things and then regulate it, then we'll have some little reprieve. Like for example, INEC, by their constitutional role, they are to supervise election, and I don't see anything wrong in trying to bring some guidelines, particularly when it comes to all this, the way you start your election, what you will feed Nigerians. But unfortunately, we have not to see that. I know when you mentioned the issue of hate speech, Nigeria are a little bit worried that you want to curtail their fundamental right, which I will agree with it. But I don't see anything wrong, INEC, in even bringing some other little ad hoc committee to monitor political party. That is part of their responsibility, but you see that they've never done that. And in this country, we have NBC. NBC regulates all our media houses, and to some point, they have done that effectively. Sometimes they will stop some, they will want some, they will do that. But I think INEC need to start that. That is the beginning of even getting, having sanity in the politics. Because I noticed today, one of the fear today is what we are feeding the populace. Not only hatred. If it's only hatred, even it's more like a terror. It is more like saying some things which you know there's no way one can believe it. And everybody's getting away with it. I do discuss this every time we hear that. We've been having elections since 1999. I'm here to see someone that will tell me that has been convicted, even arraigned, particularly when it comes to this issue of all these offenses. It is like during election in Nigeria, it's like everybody seems to have immunity so far that you are committing it under the election of political crime, whereas it is not. Murder is murder. Killing is killing. Arson is arson. Battering, stealing, robbery is robbery. You can't go to my house to snatch something and you say because they're they are thugs. They are not thugs. They are robbers. And I think that is the way they should be treated. But
all right, Dr. Ajula, thank you very much. We're getting pressed for time on this particular topic. But just for you to reaffirm what you said, if we heard you clearly, you're calling for INEC to deploy independent consultants or whoever to monitor the behavior of candidates and their parties in the lead up to the election as part of ensuring that they comply with the appropriate rules and regulations. Is that what you said?
Certainly. Even this is part of their constitutional rule.
All right.
Yes, I'm in Lagos. Lagos, you see the real street of Lagos with some political party already starting campaign. Poster left and right. The street of Lagos, VI, everywhere. And I'm here to see INEC coming up to at least warn them this is not the time for election. But unfortunately, INEC seems to be sleeping. And that is why the issue, because the essence of election is about trust. Where INEC seems to be behind one candidate, that's where the issue is. And I believe it is time to really do what they are expected to do.
All right, thank you very much. Aliu Abdullahi, from you, very briefly again, considering our political history and our national propensities, is it possible for us to have, as Dr. Akomas was saying, an issue-based electoral campaign solely without recourse to either hate speech or the exaggerated comments and statements and threats that we often get to hear about during the course of electioneering?
Well, I think it will be difficult, but it's possible to actually have an issue-based campaign. So far, most of the top two candidates for the presidential, for example, presidential election has kind of put it out there in the media space that that's the direction they want to take. Whether their teaming supporters down the line will actually toe that line, that's another different thing. But at least for the campaign councils, I think they will do that, because do you know why? 2015 is still fresh in the mind of people. There was a particular party that decided to go the way of head campaign, and we all knew what happened to that party at the end of the day in that general election in 2015. It doesn't pay to go on head speech campaign or to go on personality instead of the issues. So that must have been a great lesson for these two big political parties. And again, achievements like His Excellency said, the achievements are there for both parties, you know, to actually show. The record of 16 years of the leading opposition party is there to speak for Nigerians. If we had it good, Nigerians can be the judge. The 3 years and a half of this administration is also there. Social welfare in this, the social investment programs of this government is there like has never seen before. You know, schemes that lift people from the bottom to the top is there.
Ali Abdullahi, before we age into the time of the next topic, unfortunately today is a crowded day for us. We have 3 topics.
But he gave you a little time.
Well, sorry, that's unfortunate. We are pressed for time now. We're also discussing the midterm elections in the U.S. Unfortunately, we'd like to thank you. Of course, you're always welcome on Good Morning Nigeria, you know, to express your views. And going forward, in the next 3 months, there will be a lot to talk about with regard to the election. Lawyer, policy analyst, Ali Abdullahi, thanks a lot for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Kayode Ajulo, a legal practitioner, thanks a lot for being around. And our appreciation also to Dr. Chris Akomas, former Deputy Governor of Abia State. Thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be looking at the midterm elections in the U.S. President Donald Trump is campaigning as though he were seeking re-election right now.
Okay. What happened? It's just a little scratch, Mom. How can I play with bigger boys if I'm afraid of little scratches, right?
What comforts a mother most is to see her child growing up.
Done, I'll go.
Of course. But I know that as he learns to be brave, he'll face even more germs and the risk of infection.
That's why you need Dettol protection, because Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Growing up needs Dettol protection.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA. Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Let's now take this background report on the U.S. midterm election by Patricia Esamaluba.
U.S. voters head to the polls today, November 6th, to take part in an election seen as a referendum on Donald Trump's first 2 years in office, which will help define the remaining 2 years term in office. Reports have it that all 435 seats in the House of Representatives are up for grabs, as well as 35 seats in the Senate and 39 governorships. The Senate and House of Representatives are currently having the Republican Party as the majority, but failure to hold on to either could result in political deadlock for the U.S. leader's most determined policies. According to the latest opinion polls, the Democrats have a good shot at taking the lower house of Congress, but the Republicans are predicted to maintain control of the Senate. Data analysis of early voting as reported puts the number of people voting before polling day in 2018 midterms at more than 12 million people higher than 2014. It was recorded, however, in 2014. Approximately 19 million people voted early in the midterms, while in 2018, the number so far is slightly above 31 million. And the number of young people voting early has doubled, where the figure for people under 30 in 2014 was about 1 million, and in 2018, the number so far is above 2 million.
All right, Patricia Esamiluba, thank you very much there for that background. Right here with us in the studios, we have Ambassador Habib Habu, who is the former Consul General of Nigeria in New York. Ambassador Habu, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
You're
Good
welcome.
morning.
All right, what is so significant about the midterm elections 2018?
I think the most significant issue is what will happen to President Trump. If his party maintains its control of the two houses, then he will come out strong, and he will now continue with the programs that he's pursuing, both internally and externally. But if, on the other hand, then he loses the House, then he will definitely be mired into a situation where he will become a lame duck president for the last 2 years.
Let's quickly look at what is the concept of midterm election in the U.S.?
You know, the midterm election is essentially for the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives in America runs for only 2 years. Unlike the Nigerian system where they have 4-year term, in America it's 2 years. So, and the importance of that is to give the American people a period to assess the new president. And if you look at it, when Obama became president, they had the greatest loss, the Democrats, of any other president. They lost about 65 members of the House of Representatives. And it's according to what people are saying, there is a possibility also this time around that the number of seats that the Republicans will lose in the House will definitely increase.
So if it is majorly for the House of Representatives, what brings in the seats for the Senate and the 39 governors that have been either re-elected or something?
You know, like we've been having staggered election like Ekiti and others. Situations crop up that now create a situation where elections are not conducted at the same time. But unlike us, what the Americans did, they had been able to bring everything together so that the elections are held every 2 years. They don't just hold elections at any other time.
All right, of course, the presidential election is still ahead. In 2 years from now, that will be 2020. And some seats in the Senate are also being contested today. Yeah. Now, what are the issues framing the midterm elections?
Healthcare, the economy, and immigration. These are the three basic issues.
All right, explain.
The healthcare, you know the health system in America, it's actually held by the insurance companies. And when Obama came, he came with one idea, the healthcare bill. That healthcare bill opened up the medical facilities to people who hitherto had no access to medical facility. And what they used to do, they just manage their life without seeing a doctor. If possible, they just go to local doctor, but they will have no insurance to cover themselves for bigger sicknesses. And because of that, you find that the lower classes, the black African Americans, the Latinos, most of them, you find that about 40 to 50% of them don't have medical insurance because the system is geared towards excluding them. And what Obama did, he created a policy where all these people will have access to medical insurance, and at the same time, the insurance will cover all their previous sicknesses. Because now if you go to America and settle, and you take medical insurance, they will tell you, you have sicknesses that are not covered. Diabetes, blood pressure, cancer. They will tell you, okay, if we are to cover them, then you have to pay more.
Premium.
A premium. So that was what Obama tried to do. But it's essentially a Republican thing. It's a white thing. They make a lot of money from this insurance. And having those African Americans and the Latinos who don't contribute much, it brought in a burden to the insurance company. And that was one of the reasons why Trump decided to reverse that, because they want to get back to what they have been gaining before. And immigration, we are all aware of what is going on. Now the people from Colombia marching to the U.S. and Africans and other nationals trying to get to the U.S. And the most interesting was he said he will reverse by presidential order that when a woman delivers, she does not automatically get citizenship. But that's a constitutional thing. And I don't think that will fly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, but thanks a lot for the two issues that you've touched on. We have seen quite some, at least some of the clips on some of the international broadcast media organizations. There be clear evidence of hate speech and if not outright racism with regard to the immigration issue. How deep-seated are these issues in terms of the huge American divide that we always find with regard to race?
You see, Trump came about because he talks what the white Americans cannot talk about. They are all very happy with what he is doing, except a few, but he talks their mind. And because of that, they have no problem with listening to him, even though they will tell you, no, he's dividing the country, but they are very happy with it. And you say they are in their last throes because the American population is favoring the Latinos, and the Latinos first, and then the African Americans. They are now about 46–47% of the population. And with the number of children they give birth to, in the next 10 years, maybe 15, you find that the white America is going to be the minority. So this is their last gasp, if I could even put it that way, because there is no way that they will continue controlling the government, because politics is a game of number. If not, Obama would not have been elected as president.
In the last few weeks, the issue of sanctions against Iran came up. Yeah. Is that likely to have any role in this election?
No, not much, but he deliberately imposed it today for him to show leadership.
Yes.
And I think that's essentially the reason why he chose today. He wants to show his people that, internationally also, I am a capable leader that trusts me.
You mentioned the economy as one of the issues framing the midterm elections. Yes. And the numbers are highly favorable, as it were, to Trump and Trumpism. You can see unemployment numbers are down, for the first time in nearly 50 years. The economy is growing, and then Americans generally feel better. But again, when you drill down to analyze those obvious numbers, there are persons who are saying, wait a minute, there are issues here with regard to sustainability. Yes. How, going forward, how will a consideration of all of these issues impact on the voter who goes right there into the polling booth?
You see, that's why the American government could not actually condemn Saudi Arabia for what happened at the consulate in Turkey. The 150 billion naira arms purchase is too big to allow America to condemn condemn Saudi Arabia. the thing is, that figure of 130 billion gave the American economy the impetus to keep growing because it gives back jobs. Because of that money, nothing is going to Saudi Arabia except the equipment. So everything will be done in in the United States. So it's to the advantage of the U.S. No.
Well, as he also said, I mean, Trump, and he said this at the beginning, he said America first. And we have seen him tear down NAFTA.
Yeah.
It's now, of course, having a trade war with China. It's all over the place, throwing the weight, American weight. That's right, you know, all around. But persons will also argue, as indeed they have, that when you take a look at the trajectory of the Trump presidency, there's been quite some chaos. And so how would the voter relate to the chaos? A number of resignations, you know, from his team, and the fact that his presidency has sometimes been characterized as being very unusual. Yes. American voters, depending on how you categorize them, willing to continue with this, or they are willing to, as it were, throw his administration under the bus, you know, by making him lose the Senate and the House.
You see, I think by nature, from my reading of Trump, he had always been a bully, and he leads the chaotic life. He has been in business all his life, and it worked well for him. He made a lot of money, he lost a lot of money, but for the American government, you know, the government of America is a system-based government, and that is why you find Republican, Democrat coming. For us in Africa, it doesn't do much because it's the system. There is a system. You come in today, they can pick the most unintelligent person and give him the presidency of America, and America will work. Unlike, say, our system in Africa and other, where you have to show leadership, you have to run the government. In their own system, it's not like that. There is a system, and that system controls everything.
Yeah, but what would all of this mean? I mean, when you find, and the American presidency is a very powerful institution, you know, amongst the various institutions of government in that country. But is there any sense in which Trump's own, or Trumpism itself, is a likely factor in the voting today?
Absolutely. It's the main thing, actually. He is not on the ballot, but at the end of it, it's the presidency of Donald Trump that is being tested today. It's a referendum on Trumpism.
Do
today.
Americans feel more isolated under Trump internationally than they were? They used to pride themselves as leading the world. Donald Trump says, no, America first. He looks more inside. Do Americans miss that?
Do they even know that there is that? In America, you find the most educated person, a multimillionaire or a professor, who only knows the stories of Wuse that he lives in, or the stories that involve Abuja, or if they're important, Nigeria, but they have no information of the international world, because their system is such that they insulate the country from what they are doing outside. Because if the American people actually get to know what the U.S. is doing outside, they do a lot of good, but then they also do a lot of bad things. If the American people get to know those bad things, I'm telling you, the consequences for those elected will be much more than what is happening now.
Okay, so all right, just before we go, I was just wondering, yes, America is an important democracy in the world, an important country in the world. What would the midterm elections, the outcome thereof, mean for us in Africa or in Nigeria in particular?
For us in Nigeria, I think it will just be a continuation of what we had been having. Trade, and for us with Trump, he has promised cooperation in terms of security, in terms of terrorism, in terms of trade. All those things actually will continue, whether it's a Democrat or it's a Republican. It doesn't actually mean much. Yes.
Are there lessons we can pick from this? For instance, the midterm elections, are they attractive to us in Nigeria?
They must be. We have to. We have to learn. You see, we have to learn first to accept criticism of people, and then you don't take the criticism as enmity. It's very important, because in Nigeria you find that the moment you criticize somebody, then he becomes an enemy politically and other things. So I think we should learn quite a lot from them.
All right, Ambassador Habib Habu, former Consul General of the Nigerian Mission in New York, we'd like to thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so it's Good Morning Nigeria still. Let's go over now to our sports desk.
Brazilian tactician Rafael